Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. We are continuing with our discussion on Sri Harinam Cintamani, the discourse or the dialogue between the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his dearest devotee, Srila Haridas Thakur, who is also the designated Acharya of the holy names. So today being the 2nd of April, we would continue our discussion from the previous session. In the previous session, we had entered into the 4th chapter of Sri Harinam Cintamani. We very specifically focused on the beginning of the chapter, which is all about the offenses to the holy name. So in the first 4 chapters, or the first 3 chapters, we studied the nature of the blocks that we suffer from. Now we are going to go into great detail on the 10 offenses to the holy name. In every initiation ceremony in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara, we are given instructions on the offenses. Practically, when the Guru speaks during an initiation ceremony, the focus is on being able to mitigate the offenses to the holy names. There's really no other focus. Now, in the 4th chapter, specifically, Srila Haridas Thakur starts with this particular statement, the statement to Mahaprabhu. He says, the scriptures enumerate 10 offenses against the holy name, and I'm very fearful of these offenses. I am very fearful of these offenses. I will list them one by one. Please give me strength to avoid these offenses, my Lord. So, when he says, I'm very fearful of these offenses, we spent time last week trying to understand as to whether we carry fear in committing offenses. Do we carry fear of losing the potency or losing our ability to engage in devotional service? Do we have fear in terms of being able to understand that, we have to avoid the offenses while chanting the holy names? Do we have fear in losing our economic ability? The answer is yes. Every one of us is afraid of losing their job, or every one of us is afraid of losing wealth which would sustain them. Every one of us is also afraid or carries fear in terms of health. Every one of us carries fear in terms of relationships. We all carry fear in different spheres of life, and as a consequence, life is considered to be quite troublesome because of all these anxieties. Now, why do we carry such fear? We went into it the previous week. We carry fear because we have assigned a certain value to these different objects or areas of life. We have assigned value to the importance of economic certainty. We have assigned value to stable relationships in life. We have assigned value to a healthy disposition, right? We have assigned value to these different areas of life, and as a consequence, we are fearful because there's value. We are afraid to lose something that we value. And why do we not fear committing offenses during the chanting of the holy names? Why do we not fear committing offenses during the chanting of the holy names? It's because we do not have a good understanding of the value of the holy names. What is it which has been given to us? This understanding has not come to us. It is not fully available. And as a consequence, we have a tendency to engage in offensive chanting. We have a tendency to engage in grievous offenses which can take away and even destroy our bhakti. In many cases, practically 99.9% of the cases, all of them practically, all our problems with devotional service are because of offenses. Practically everything is because of offenses. So the recommendation we had the previous week was to write down a particular note and put it and stick it on the bathroom mirror, because that's the place we enter into when we wake up in the morning. We have a tendency to enter into the bathroom to engage in cleaning ourselves before beginning the holy names, the recitation of the holy names, or any such activity. So stick it on the mirror so that you will be able to see as to whether you are afraid. Are you afraid of committing offenses towards the holy name? Then come back, read the 10 offenses. Read the 10 offenses. The 10 offenses towards the holy name are: number 1, to criticize saintly persons, sadhu ninda. Number 2, If we criticize saintly persons, everything else will follow. Everything else will follow. Please keep that in mind. This is almost like if you do this, everything else is destined to follow. To criticize saintly persons, number two, to consider the demigods to be independent of the Supreme Lord, or that Lord Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes are separate from the Lord. Philosophical distortion occurs the moment we criticize offenses to the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. Sadhu Ninda immediately results in philosophical distortion. What is the specific quality of a sadhu? We spoke about it the previous week. We said a sadhu is recognized in two ways. There are qualities which are called primary, which is the Swarup Lakshana, and then the secondary qualities are also available, which are Tatastha, that which results because someone is in touch with something profound. But there is a primary quality which defines what a sadhu is. So what is the Swarup Lakshana of a sadhu? The Swarup Lakshana of a sadhu is that he is completely dependent on the shelter of Lord Krishna. He is completely dependent. When Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja, that Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja, Ma Suchaha, has been completely accepted in the heart of the devotee. That is the definition of a sadhu. And then there are other qualities which are called tatastha, secondary. Why are those qualities called secondary? Because that is not the primary reason why we call people a sadhu. In other words, they develop because the person is completely taken shelter of the Supreme Lord. Now, what are those qualities? He is merciful, kripa, tolerant, equal to all. These three qualities define Trinadapi Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amani, Manadena, Kirtane Sadahari. Merciful, tolerant, equal to all, performing penances without excessively inflicting injury to the body. Why is this a quality of the sadhu? Excessive inflicting of injury to the body comes about because of a need for us to harden our heart through austerities. It is more a matter of pride of performing austerities, to the extent to which we even disregard the resources provided by the Lord. The body belongs to the Lord. If we torment the body, we are also tormenting a certain level of what has been offered by the Lord. And when we perform austerities, which are beyond what is necessary or required for the execution of devotional service, when we perform austerities for the sake of attaining other objects in life, such austerities have a tendency of hardening our heart. The heart will not be soft, and a soft heart is a prerequisite for chanting the holy names. So when we harden the heart, then automatically we also find it difficult, and there's false pride and so on and so forth. Have you ever seen that people who perform great austerities, they may not be quite humble? Humility is not something which they may own. There could be cases where they are also performing great austerities and also humble, but generally the yogis who perform great austerities also attain powers, and that makes them quite proud, arrogant. Okay, they get intoxicated by such power. They get intoxicated by their ability. So it is not such a wonderful thing. And we also notice the quality of performing austerities. The asuras are very good at it. Nobody can perform austerities like Hiranyakashipu did, isn't it? He started cutting his body. He started offering it into the fire. He started offering his own body by mutilating it. This is typical of asuric tendency, where they harm themselves in the process of trying to prove something or trying to get something. They'll go to any length. This is called ugra karma. This is not something which is recommended for advancement in devotional service. However, we accept all conditions imposed on by Krishna, and that is humility. We act upon it. So it does not mean that we reject opportunities because our body finds it inconvenient. We will take it on purely because Krishna has provided that opportunity. We do not do it based on our own propensity to attain material qualities. Okay? So, excessively inflicting injury to the body, performing penances, without excessively inflicting, that is the quality of a sadhu. Truthful, pure-hearted, compassionate, free from lusty intelligence, master of the senses, voluntarily accepting material impoverishment, gentle, clean, regulated in eating, peaceful, apathetic to materialism, patient, steady, taking Lord Krishna as his only shelter. This is the main quality. Free from illusion, grave, a conqueror over hunger, thirst, lamentation, envy, and old age, not expecting honor from others, offering respect to others, expert, not a cheater, and knowledgeable. All of these are qualities of a sadhu. However, these are swarupa. These are divided into two parts. One is the original swarupa, and the other is the tatastha. Tatastha is that which develops because someone has attained or is engaging in the original quality. The original quality is complete surrender and shelter of Krishna. The tatastha is that which develops because the original is now in place. Okay? So now this is a sadhu. We understood that part. Okay? We have to define who is a sadhu so that we can understand what is sadhu ninda. Now, what are the other offenses? We started out by saying to criticize saintly persons, number one. Number two, to consider demigods to be independent of the Supreme Lord. What did we say the definition of a sadhu was? The Swarup Lakshana is complete shelter of Krishna. Now look at the second offense. As soon as you offend a sadhu, as soon as we offend a sadhu, the second offense is we start thinking that the demigods are independent of Supreme Lord, or Lord Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes are separate from the Lord. We move away from even understanding what is the specific requirement of surrender. We move away from the Swarup Lakshana of devotional service, the movement and offense is committed to the sadhu. If you offend a certain principle, there would be great harm that proceeds because of that offense. Okay? Now, generally, there's great destruction that comes upon when a sadhu is obstructed, when a sadhu is offended. We'll be going into it in great detail because there's nothing more important than understanding what is sadhu ninda and how to avoid it. There's nothing more important. Number three, to disobey the spiritual master who reveals the truth about the holy name, because the spiritual master has given us faith. And that faith gets disturbed when we think that Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes are separate from the Lord. When we commit offense number one, it results in offense number two. When we commit offense number two, it results in the spiritual master himself being disregarded because we have forgotten his instructions. Number four, automatically the next step is we forget the scriptures. We begin criticizing the scriptures that describe the glories of the holy name. So the primary shelter is also escaping us. And then number five, to consider the excellence and divine qualities of the holy name as delineated in the scriptures to be imaginary. Okay? It is just going on now. Once the first step is committed, the slip starts happening. Number six, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. Let me do something today which is sinful, and then possibly I can compensate by chanting a few rounds extra. That is a height, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 7, to instruct faithless persons on the glories of the holy name. Okay, this is an offense. Why does it happen? It happens because we are now basically engaging others. It's very sensitive to portray ourselves as Vaishnavas and engage in the society. And the reason why it is sensitive is because even when we engage in activities which are mundane, let us say, for instance, that you're driving. While you're driving, you by accident, for instance, by somehow or some propensity or other, there's some kind of a disturbance caused by us to others. In such situations, there could be a lot of aggravation. People yell, people shout at us, and so on and so forth. Okay, we don't go and exacerbate that. We don't increase it. Okay, that is our first point. First point is you do not participate in aggravating others. Okay, because we are on the path of becoming sadhus. We are not sadhus yet because we have not fully embraced the quality of exclusive shelter of Krishna. We have not fully embraced that. Okay, we have not fully embraced that part. So since that exclusive shelter of Krishna has not been fully embraced by us, we are still not fully surrendered. Okay, if we had fully surrendered, we would be chanting the pure name, right? So as a consequence, we are still on the path. But even though we are on the path, for us to come in touch with others has to be auspicious for them. We do not present difficulties to others in the world. When we present difficulties to others in the world voluntarily, and others react violently to us, it's very harmful to them. So that is the first point we have to understand from this. Okay. Second is, when we instruct faithless people, they blaspheme the holy name. So they cause harm to ourselves. They also cause harm to themselves beyond hope. So we have to be very careful in being able to instruct faithless people. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean that we do not chant? No. We can go on Harinam. People can listen to Harinam. They can be distributed prasadam. They can be distributed books. You can do all of that. But you do not engage in sharing confidential aspects of the glories of the holy name. You have to be a little strategic, and you also have to be tactical in being able to present a preaching proposition to someone. You have to be very clear. Okay, this is the first meeting I have with someone. What should I do? Should I sit down and tell them about offenses? Should I tell them about, onion, garlic, and, our whole thing of what we don't do? Do we tell them about everything? No. First and foremost, you encourage them by fanning their propensity. You give them prasadam. You treat them very nicely. You endear yourself to them. Show them a lot of affection. As a consequence, they become inspired to come again and interact with you. They become inspired to come in touch with people who are in touch with the holy name. So that's our objective. So you have to be very careful when you're preaching, where we do not want to give all kinds of rules, regulations, so on and so forth when we come in touch with people. So that's what this is all about. We do not share confidential aspects. We do not tell people about the confidential aspects of the divine couple. These are all aspects which are considered to be extraordinarily confidential. We do not share it with those who are envious. But we do give them what will help them. So we share Harinam, we share Prasadam. These are all things that are absolutely permissible. So we have to be very careful in even formulating how we preach and what we preach. It's very important for us. And I'm using the word preach because, in the sense that we are sharing the glories of the holy name, but we have to be very careful in how we do it. Now, offense number 8, to think of the holy name with the materially auspicious activities recommended in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. It's a big offense because mere chanting of the holy names, which is the shadow of the holy names, Namabhas, can grant liberation. What to say of Bhoga? What to say of, the Bhukti Marga? When it can grant Mukti, it can also grant, all kinds of opulences. So trying to equate the holy names, which can grant us Krishna Prema, to something which is like a shadow, which is completely insignificant and impermanent, which can be obtained by other means, is a great offense. To be inattentive while chanting the holy name, one cannot be attentive if they have committed the previous 8 offenses, because they have not understood the holy names, they are committing sadhu ninda, they have rejected their guru because they have not accepted the saying, whatever he has instructed them. They cannot be attentive. The mind will not allow them to be attentive. They're completely situated and they have lost immunity. What is the last one? To not develop love for the holy name after knowing his glories because of maintaining attachments to the body and things related to the body. Now, these are the 10 offenses that we regularly read while we take initiation. That's number 1. But we don't quite go into it. We do not go into it. We somewhat keep everything superficial. Okay? In the next several weeks, you're going to go very deep into each and every one of these offenses. But today, we want to stick to being able to talk about the first one, offending sadhus, committing sadhu ninda. Okay? We defined sadhu. We said the Swarup Lakshana of a sadhu is someone who has taken complete shelter of Krishna. Now, this person who has taken complete shelter of Krishna may have had a past which was questionable. We do not judge a sadhu based on his past. We judge a sadhu based on the present. We judge a sadhu based on the qualities of complete surrender to Krishna as we see it. Okay? Every sinner has a future. Every saint has a past. It's a fact. And you will notice that in our movement, in the amount of mercy that was provided by Lord Nityananda, the amount of mercy that was provided by Srila Prabhupada, there were many, many personalities who joined the movement who basically were engaging in activities which were completely against the principles of religion. They were completely the opposite of what was supposed to be done and what was not supposed to be done, right? But judging the devotees of the Lord today based on their past is a grievous offense. It's a grievous offense because now we are moving away from the principle of judging the sadhu. We are moving away from the principle of judging the sadhu by saying that a sadhu is someone who has taken complete shelter of Krishna. You're judging a sadhu based on his past. Great offense. Either his physical appearance, either his past, whatever the case may be. If you judge them, it is a great offense. That is number one. Number two is something to remember, an offense that often happens, is you could be right. You could be right in making a certain assessment about a sadhu. You could be right about some administrative fact which is being carried out by the person or not being carried out. We could be right about, for instance, we could say that the distribution of books is the primary means of deliverance. Distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books is the primary means of deliverance. It is the primary strategy that one has to adopt. Okay? This could be a statement which is absolutely true. But how are you going to say that? What if you say things that are right, but you say it in the wrong manner? Okay? And we attack the sadhu who is doing something else or who has a different viewpoint. That becomes a grievous offense. So what is the nature of offense that occurs amongst Vaishnavas? The nature of offense that occurs amongst Vaishnavas, the followers of Vishnu, the followers of Krishna, is such that we could be doing many things right, but we could be doing it the wrong way. We could be correcting someone, but we could be correcting someone the wrong way. So there are several options here. We could be doing something wrong, and we could be doing something wrong in the wrong way. So that is a double whammy, as we say. It hits you twice. We could be doing something wrong. We could be doing something wrong in the right way. Okay, but it still is an offense. We could be doing something right, but we could be doing something right in the wrong way. We could be correcting a Vaishnav, but in a very offensive, audacious, arrogant manner based on our own propensity. That's where the great offenses get committed. We could get offensive based on something which is a right principle, but we could be doing it the wrong way. Please remember that, because that's where we all get caught. We all get caught because we become self-righteous. We start thinking that such and such is the way to do things, which could very well be right. There's no denying that. We start thinking that such and such is the right way to do things, but what we do is that we present it to the Vaishnav who is not fitting into our world or who is not fitting into our viewpoint in a manner that is extraordinarily offensive. That is our failing. Everything begins for us from there. No one is spared. No one, even a Bhava Bhakta, someone who has attained the beginning stages of prema, who's entered into prema, is not spared for Vaishnava Aparadh. He is not spared. He or she is not spared. Okay? There are scriptural evidence where there are fall downs even of someone who is extraordinarily highly situated. Okay? And the fall down can occur because the person is right, but he represents whatever he thinks is right in the wrong way. Now we go back to an example which is given in the scriptures, that during the time of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there was the 16th century, I presume, 16th and 17th century, 17th century. 17th century, which when Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was on the planet, there was this exalted devotee, Sri Krishna Priya Thakurani. It's a Mataji, one of our extraordinarily inspiring leaders, was Srila Krishna Priya Thakurani. And then there was an extraordinary preacher by name Srila Rupa Kaviraj. This Rupa Kaviraj was extraordinarily good in preaching, and he used to hold preaching sessions which were attended by countless people. He had great Shastric knowledge. He was a Shrutidar. He could quote verses all over the place. He was also experiencing the beginning stages of Bhava Bhakti, which is the highest epitome of the path. He's entering into the realm of prema. He's experiencing emotions, very highly qualified emotions. He has understood his sambandha. But even with all that sambandha gyan, he was very potent as a preacher. However, the unfortunate circumstance was that one day while he was giving a class and there was a large audience, Sri Krishna Priya Thakurani, she walked in. And when she walked into the audience, because of her exalted nature and her extraordinary attachment to the holy names, she could not stop chanting. She used to constantly chant. And the moment she walked in, there was some disturbance in the audience. Because she walked in, there was some disturbance, there was some disruption. And this was noticed by Srila Rupa Kaviraj. When he noticed the disturbance caused by her, and he also noticed that she was constantly chanting, he began criticizing her. That was his deadly mistake. Now, let us look at the situation. Number one, there was a disturbance in the class. Okay, accepted. Number two, someone was acting in a manner which was not fully comprehensible. Okay. So both of these situations could be things that one could comment upon. However, commenting upon her behavior, commenting upon the disturbance which was occurring in the class and so on, in a manner which was derogatory, in a manner which was filled with arrogance, saw the end of Rupa Kaviraj. He fell all the way from the highest platform of bhakti to becoming a ghostly entity in his next lifetime. Okay? The moment that happened, the Sadhu Ninda happened, his classes became distorted. He began distorting the philosophy based on concoctions. Once he started concocting, even though he was concocting, he still had Sangha. He had people listening to him, which happens because he was a skilled speaker. Even though he was not giving the right philosophy, there would still be an audience because there would be people who would want to listen to whatever he says. And as this continued, he built his big audience and he started walking on a path which was a complete distortion. This happens. It happens a lot, especially when there is Vaishnava aparadh. All it will take, even for a very elevated soul, is one offense to the lotus feet of an elevated Vaishnava. One offense. Right? Did we not see Jaya and Vijaya right in the doorstep of Vaikuntha? But they committed offenses towards the Kumaras. What did they do? They offended the Kumaras based on their appearance. They were small boys. They were small sages. They could not understand the potency. Of course, one can say that this was the arrangement of the Lord. They were Vaikuntavasis. But this was the arrangement of the Lord. But the fact remains that there was judgment or lack of judgment. The offense was committed. And what did it result in? You fall all the way from Vaikuntha to becoming completely the opposite, which is you become an Asura. What did they do? They became Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, they became Ravana, Kumbhakarna, they became Sishupal and Dantavakra. What happens? This entire distortion is that you fall from the highest to the lowest. What does this mean? It means that we are in touch with a 5,000 watt cable. The 5,000 watt cable can light up a whole city. Okay, I'm not an electrical engineer. I could be misquoting the potency required to light up a city. So don't quote me on this. What I meant to say was we could be very close to a very, very powerful source of power, okay, which could light up an entire city. But the same source of power, if we misuse it or we touch it in the wrong way, could electrocute us. Okay? It could electrocute us. It could simply electrocute us. So we have to understand that when power is available, it can either be extraordinarily rewarding or it can become extraordinarily destructive. Both can occur. We have to keep that in mind. That's number one. Number two, What we also need to understand is that in most cases, devotees commit offenses in areas where their intelligence is guiding them as being right. Okay? But in reality, the way they present things is completely wrong. And as a consequence, they pay a huge price. So, what should we do? We should become extraordinarily fearful before we approach a Vaishnav in trying to correct their behavior. Understand that you have to approach the Vaishnav in the mood of wanting to serve them. If you cannot approach the Vaishnav in the mood of wanting to serve them and wanting to formulate your response and wanting to guide them in the proper way, don't do that. Go to someone whom you believe is qualified, who can guide them. Do not take up this kind of venture of trying to correct someone who, especially if you notice, is superior to you. Dangerous. Because the more qualified a person is, the more dangerous it becomes. Okay? Now let us take on a couple of examples, okay, of situations in the Bhagavatam. We'll take one example because we're out of time almost. In the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we read about Saubari Muni. And the Saubari Muni was a great yogi. He was so powerful that for multiple thousands of years, he had submerged himself deep beneath the Yamuna, and he was actually engaging in austerities underwater so that he's not going to be disturbed. But then what do we understand from this? He was underwater, but he was not completely immune to the effects of the environment because he was not engaging in bhakti. He was engaging in the process of yoga or Ashtanga yoga, where his own strength was the main consideration. So while he was deep underwater, he became enthralled and distracted by the procreation of fishes. Somewhat incredible for us to even conceive, even though we are not, munis or rishis or anything. We find, how is this possible that someone could watch fish engage in procreation and become distracted and develop sex desire? Okay? He developed such desires, and as a consequence, even though he was extraordinarily aged, he broke his penance and he came out and wanted to marry the daughter of a king. And when he wanted to marry the daughter of a king, he noticed that his body was not quite what it was supposed to be. He was very old because he had engaged in austerities. He was old. So he decided to change his body. So he had yogic potency. He changed his body. He created a situation where there was a lot of opulence, and he became very good looking, and he went back to the king. So he became the husband of the 50 daughters of the king, and he begot 100 sons in each of them, which is 5,000 children. And this is by someone who was actually so austere that he was underwater, wanting to not engage in the world. Fascinating. But why did this occur? The more interesting part is not this, because this happens all the time. This happens all the time when you're in touch with material energy. It is very easy to get entrapped. The fascinating question is, why did this occur? Where did this weakness come from? Because weakness develops when we lose our immunity, isn't it? There are germs all around us. There are germs in our body. There are germs in the environment. Some of us travel, for instance, by the subway. We travel by bus, so on and so forth. We interact with people, and we pick up germs all the time. Germs are in the environment. But it is when our immune system is particularly weak that we fall very sick, isn't it? Similarly, weakness occurs in spiritual life when our immune system becomes weak. When does immune system become weak in spiritual life? It becomes weak when we lose the shelter of Krishna. Krishna is protecting us from falling apart due to the engagement of our senses with their objects. When Krishna removes his particular protection, we fall down. So the weakness occurs when we offend a devotee. It is almost like putting ourselves in a position where the immunity which we have by being under the shelter of Krishna goes away when we offend a devotee. Saubari Muni, he was very attached to the fish because he was deep within the water. And he was very attached to the king of the fish. Okay, because there was a king there. Even the fish have king. There's a hierarchy in the animal kingdom. He was very attached. One day, Sri Garuda is an expansion of the Lord. Ananta expands into Garuda. He is a great Vaishnav, superlative Vaishnav. The name for Garuda is Vedatma. What does it mean? One whose Atma is the Vedas. Amongst the four Vedas, the Samaveda is the most prominent. And in the Samaveda, the Brihat Sama is most prominent. The Rig Veda has verses which have mantras. The same mantras are written in a poetic form in Samaveda, and amongst those, there is the Brihat Sama. The Brihat Sama is like the core or the heart of the Samaveda, and that Brihat Sama is specifically the glorification of the Supreme Lord. Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita, that amongst the four, he is the Samaveda. Now, Garuda is the vehicle which carries Vishnu, Krishna, right? And how do we come in touch with Krishna? Through the vehicle of Shastras, right? So the personification of Garuda is in reality all the Shastras which glorify Krishna. Garuda is the personification of Shastras who glorify Krishna, because through Shastras we get to know Krishna. Through Garuda, Krishna comes to us, isn't it? He travels and he comes to us. Similarly, we also read Shastra and he comes to us. So Garuda, his entire body and his Atma is made of the personification of the glorification of the Lord. He is non-different from Vedas. Sri Garuda is non-different from Vedas. That is why he is called Vedatma, right? Shastra Yoni. He is called Vedatma because that is where he is. Okay? So now we have to understand that this superlative devotee is exalted Vaishnava, is insulted by Saubhari Muni. And since he is insulted by Saubhari Muni, how is he insulted? Because Garuda grabs the fish. Garuda once became hungry and he consumed the fish to which Saubhari Muni was attached. And Saubhari Muni cursed Garuda that if he ever comes in that particular area, then he would attain some kind of severe repercussions. That curse caused great weakness in the determination of Saubhari Muni, and that is why he developed attachment to wanting to live material life. Okay, so this is the story of how we bring upon weakness upon us, and how sadhu ninda results particularly in breaking down our entire devotional process. Okay. So what we will do today is that if there are any questions you may ask now, we will end here. We will take on further questions in the next session. Are there any questions? We'll just probably give you a minute. If you click on Q&A on the left-hand side of the screen, you will be able to ask questions. So if you have any questions, please do post it now. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you very much for joining us. Hare Krishna.